The first thing May Thompson noticed wasn't the pain, but the silence. It was a profound, cathedral-like quiet that had replaced the cacophony of screams, the crash of crystal, and the deafening roar that had ripped through the rosewood terrace just moments before. Then came the cold, a damp chill spreading across the starched white fabric of her blouse, followed by a searing heat that felt like a hot poker being pressed into her side. She blinked, and the world swam back into focus, a kaleidoscope of blurred white tablecloths and the terrified wide eyes of a little girl huddled beneath her. "It's okay," May whispered, the words tasting of dust and copper. "You're okay, sweetie. I've got you." The little girl, Lily, didn't make a sound. She just trembled, her tiny fingers clutching the sleeve of May's uniform, her face buried in the hollow of May's shoulder. Above them, the chaos began to resolve into distinct sounds. Shouts, the scuffle of feet, a man's voice, low and guttural with rage, barking orders. "Lily, where is my daughter?" That voice. It cut through May's foggy consciousness like a shard of glass. It belonged to the man in the corner booth, the one with eyes the color of a gathering storm and a suit that cost more than her car. Lucas Turner. "She's here," May managed, her voice a strained rasp. "She's safe." A shadow fell over them. Hands, strong and shaking with adrenaline, were on her, gently trying to pry her away. "Let me see her. Let me see my daughter." May gritted her teeth against a fresh wave of pain and shifted her weight, revealing the small, unharmed child she had covered with her own body. Lucas Turner swept Lily into his arms, his face a mask of raw, unfiltered relief. He crushed his daughter to his chest, murmuring her name over and over, his gaze sweeping her from head to toe, checking for injuries that weren't there. It was only then, when he was certain Lily was unscathed, that his storm-grey eyes fell back to May. They widened, the relief draining away to be replaced by a stark, chilling horror. He was staring at her side, at the dark, rapidly expanding stain on her white shirt. It wasn't wine. "Oh, God," he breathed, the words barely audible. You're bleeding." May looked down, the world tilted on its axis. The pristine white of the rosewood terrace's signature linen napkins, which she had been delivering to his table, were now scattered around her, spattered with a horrifying crimson. "The vase," she mumbled, her thoughts becoming sluggish, disconnected. "It was a Qing dynasty. Celadon glaze." Lucas stared at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about? You've been shot." "No," she whispered, a strange, detached clarity cutting through the haze. "Not shot. The bullet hit the pedestal. The vase. It exploded. Shrapnel. It was porcelain shrapnel." Then the world went dark. The last sound she heard was Lucas Turner's voice, roaring for a medic with an authority that expected and received immediate obedience. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. May's alarm had blared at 5:30 a.m., dragging her from a dream of sun-drenched Italian hillsides and the scent of oil paints. Reality was a cramped studio apartment in a less than fashionable part of Pasadena, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and the turpentine she used for her secret passion. On a small easel in the corner, a half-finished canvas depicted the intricate facade of the Bradbury building, its wrought iron and glazed brick captured in painstaking detail. It was her escape, the one place where she wasn't just a waitress, but an artist, a historian, a keeper of small, forgotten beauties. Her real life was a ledger of debts and obligations, the mountain of medical bills left behind by her grandfather's long illness, the mortgage on his failed antique shop, a dusty mausoleum of treasures nobody wanted anymore, which she stubbornly refused to sell. She'd promised him she'd keep it, that one day she'd reopen it. It was a foolish promise, a child's promise, but it was all she had left of him. He was the one who had taught her to see the world differently, to notice the maker's mark on a piece of silver, the subtle crazing on a piece of pottery that told a story of centuries. He'd given her a love for things that lasted, things with history and soul. It was a useless skill for a waitress, but it was a part of her she couldn't erase. By 10 a.m., she was at the Rosewood Terrace, the crisp white shirt and black pencil skirt of her uniform feeling like a costume. The restaurant was a temple of minimalist luxury, a sea of white marble and glass that bathed the dining room in California's unforgiving sunlight. It was beautiful, but sterile. May preferred the building's history, the original Art Deco cornices that the designers had thankfully left intact. She often found herself sketching them on the back of order pads during her breaks. "Thompson, stop daydreaming and polish the silverware. The Turner party is coming in at 1. And for God's sake, try to look like you belong here for once." Ethan Morales, the restaurant's manager, glided past her, his voice a low hiss of condescension. He was a man composed of sharp angles and expensive cologne, with a smile that never reached his eyes. He despised May, for reasons she could never quite pinpoint. Perhaps it was her quiet competence, which highlighted his own frantic insecurity. Or maybe it was the fact that she saw things he didn't, a slight wobble in a table leg before a customer complained, a faint water stain on the ceiling that hinted at a leak, the way he always steered high-tipping clients to his favored waiters. "Yes, Ethan," she said, her voice neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting was a waste of energy. The Turner party. The name buzzed through the staff like an electric current. Lucas Turner wasn't just wealthy. He was a titan of the tech industry, a visionary who had built a software empire from his college dorm room. He was also, according to the whispers, a recluse since his wife's death 3 years prior. A single father, fiercely protective of his only child. Today, he was hosting a lunch for 20 of the most powerful venture capitalists in the country. The success of this lunch could mean billions in funding for his next audacious project. For the Rosewood Terrace, it meant a tidal wave of prestige. For Ethan, it was the performance of a lifetime. May was assigned to the periphery, serving water and bread, clearing plates from the smaller, less important tables. It suited her fine. She preferred to be invisible, an observer on the sidelines. At 1 o'clock they arrived, a procession of bespoke suits and designer dresses, a murmur of quiet power filling the room. Lucas Turner was last, holding his daughter's hand. In person, he was more imposing than his photos suggested. There was a coiled tension in his posture, a restless energy that seemed at odds with the calm, controlled mask he presented to the world. His daughter, Lily, was a miniature version of him, with the same dark hair but her mother's warm, brown eyes. She clung to his leg, her gaze fixed on the floor, overwhelmed by the sea of strangers. May's heart went out to her. She remembered that feeling, the paralyzing shyness of being a child in a world built for giants. The lunch was a carefully orchestrated ballet. Ethan was everywhere, his smile stretched to a painful degree, his laughter a fraction too loud. May moved through the room like a ghost, her movements efficient and silent. She noticed the small details, the way one of the investors, a stern-looking woman named Eleanor Vance, barely touched her food, the way Lucas Turner's hand repeatedly strayed to his tie, as if loosening a noose, the way Lily sat, drawing on a napkin with a crayon May had slipped her, a tiny island of stillness in a sea of ambition. It was during the dessert course that it happened. 2 men in ski masks burst through the main entrance, one brandishing a handgun. The serene atmosphere shattered. A woman screamed. A chair clattered to the floor. "Everybody down! Wallets, watches, phones on the table. Now! Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing. May's training kicked in. Stay calm, comply, don't make eye contact. Her gaze, however, was drawn to the corner of the room, near the entrance. A priceless Qing dynasty vase, famous for its celadon glaze and delicate form, sat on a marble pedestal. Her grandfather would have been able to talk for an hour about its provenance, its rarity. It was directly in the line of fire between the gunman and the main dining room. The robbers were amateurs, high on adrenaline and fear. One of them, the one without the gun, started grabbing bags from the tables. He moved toward the Turner party, his eyes wide and greedy. Lucas Turner had already moved, shielding Lily with his body, his face a granite mask of cold fury. One of the investors, a young tech bro full of bravado, decided to be a hero. He stood up. "Hey man, just chill out, okay?" It was the stupidest thing he could have done. The gunman panicked. He swung the gun, and it went off. The sound was a physical blow, a concussive force that shook the very air. May didn't see the bullet, but she saw its path. She saw it miss the tech bro and slam into the marble pedestal. She saw the priceless porcelain, a survivor of dynasties and revolutions, erupt in a cloud of pale green dust and 1,000 razor-sharp fragments. And she saw that the explosion was directly in line with Lily Turner. There was no thought. There was only instinct. The same instinct that made her shield a fragile drawing from a spilled drink, the same impulse that made her protect things of beauty and value. She moved. 3 quick steps and a dive, her body covering Lily's just as the wave of porcelain shrapnel sliced through the air. She felt a series of sharp, stinging impacts across her back and a single, deep, piercing agony in her side. It was as if a giant hand had reached inside her and twisted. She registered the surprised grunt of the man behind her, Lucas Turner, as she collided with him, knocking them all to the floor in a heap. Then the silence, and the cold, and the dawning, horrific realization that she was bleeding out on the white marble floor of the rosewood terrace. Waking up was a slow, painful process. For 3 days, May drifted in a fog of morphine and disjointed dreams. She dreamt of her grandfather's shop, the scent of lemon oil and old paper, his voice a low rumble as he explained the difference between Ming and Qing porcelain. She dreamt of canvases, vast and white, waiting for a color she couldn't find. When she finally surfaced, the first thing she saw was Lucas Turner's face. He was sitting in a chair beside her hospital bed, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a 3-day growth of stubble shadowed his jaw. He looked less like a tech billionaire, and more like a man who had been through a war. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion, and something else she couldn't name. Relief? "Lily," was the first word she managed to croak. A small smile touched his lips. "She's fine. Unharmed. She's been asking for you every hour. My sister is with her now." He leaned forward, his grey eyes intense. "The doctors said you were lucky. The largest piece of shrapnel missed your kidney by a centimetre. They removed 17 fragments from your back and side." May tried to push herself up, wincing as a bolt of pain shot through her torso. "My job, Ethan." "Don't worry about your job," Lucas said, a hard edge to his voice. "Don't worry about anything. I'm taking care of it." "Taking care of it?" she repeated, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means your medical bills are paid, all of them. And there's a severance package being arranged from the restaurant, a very generous one." May stared at him. It felt like he was speaking a foreign language. People like her didn't have things taken care of. They scraped and fought and negotiated payment plans. You don't have to do that. It was an accident. Workman's comp should... May. He said her name for the first time, and it sounded strange in his mouth. He reached out and laid his hand on her arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. You threw yourself in front of my daughter. You took a piece of porcelain that was heading for her face. This isn't a negotiation. This is a debt. And I always pay my debts. There was a finality in his tone that silenced her. He saw it as a transaction. An act of heroism was an invoice to be paid. She had saved his most valuable asset, and he, in turn, would settle the account. The thought left a sour taste in her mouth. She hadn't done it for a reward. She had done it because a child was in danger. Over the next few days, a strange parade of visitors appeared at her door, the venture capitalists from the lunch. One by one they came, their arms laden with extravagant floral arrangements and gift baskets that could feed a family for a month. They were awkward, unused to hospital rooms and genuine messy emotion. "Remarkable courage," said David Chen, a tech legend who had been on the cover of Forbes. "In a world of self-interest, a truly selfless act," added Eleanor Vance, the stern-faced woman from the lunch, her eyes surprisingly warm. They all said the same thing. They all thanked her, and they all left their business cards with murmurs of, "If you ever need anything." It was surreal. These people, who lived in a different stratosphere, were treating her like a hero. But May felt like a fraud. She hadn't been courageous. She had just reacted. And now she was caught in the gravitational pull of Lucas Turner's world, and she didn't know how to escape. Lucas himself was a constant presence. He'd arrive after Lily was asleep, and they would sit in the quiet hum of the hospital room. He was a guarded man. But in the sterile quiet of the night, pieces of him began to emerge. He spoke of his late wife with a profound, aching sadness. He spoke of his work with a restless, obsessive passion. And he spoke of Lily with a fierce, almost desperate love that was tangled up with guilt. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted one night, staring out the window at the city lights. How to be enough for her. My wife, she was the sun. She knew how to make everything okay. I just know how to build things and solve problems. She doesn't need you to be the sun," May said softly, surprising herself. "She just needs you to sit with her in the dark sometimes." He turned to look at her, a flicker of surprise in his grey eyes. He saw her then, she realized. Not as the waitress, not as the hero, but as a person. And in that moment, the dynamic between them shifted from benefactor and recipient to something more complex, something more human. When she was discharged a week later, a black town car was waiting for her. Lucas was holding the door open. "This will take you home," he said. "My apartment is just a few miles away. I can take a cab." "It's not taking you to your old apartment," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It's taking you to your new one, a temporary place, secure, with a guest room for a nurse if you need one. You can't recover in a fourth-floor walk-up." May's pride bristled. "Mr. Turner, I appreciate everything, but I can't accept this. It's too much." "Lucas," he corrected her. "And it's not too much. It's the bare minimum. You need a safe, quiet place to heal. This is not a gift. It's a medical necessity. Consider it part of the settlement." He was using logic as a weapon, boxing her in. She was too weak, too tired to fight. Defeated, she slid into the plush leather interior of the car. As they pulled away from the curb, she saw her own reflection in the tinted window, a pale, tired woman in borrowed clothes, being whisked away to a life that wasn't hers. It felt less like a rescue and more like a kidnapping. The apartment was a glass box in the sky, with panoramic views of the Los Angeles skyline. It was beautiful, impersonal, and felt as welcoming as a museum. For the first week, May felt like an intruder. She ate the food that was delivered, took her medication, and spent hours staring out the window, watching a world she was no longer a part of. Lucas called daily. Lily called too, her small voice chattering over the speakerphone about her day, always ending with, "When can I see you, May?" The question twisted something in May's chest. She was becoming a fixture in this child's life, a temporary one. The thought was unbearable. Finally, Lucas came to visit. He found her not in the sprawling living room, but in the small, empty second bedroom, where she had set up the small, portable easel she'd had him retrieve from her old apartment. She was sketching the view from the window with a piece of charcoal. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her. "I didn't know you were an artist." "I'm not," she said automatically. "I just dabble." "That's more than dabbling," he said, his eyes on the intricate details of her sketch. "You have a remarkable eye." He looked around the sterile apartment. "This place is wrong for you, isn't it?" "It's very generous." "It's a cage," he said, his honesty disarming her. "A comfortable one, but still a cage." "I'm sorry. I thought I was helping. I solve problems by throwing resources at them. It's my biggest strength and my greatest weakness." He walked further into the room. "I have a proposition for you, May, and it's not charity. It's a job." May put down her charcoal, her heart thumping. "I own a property," he began, "up in the hills. My grandparents' old estate. It's been empty for years since they passed. It's a piece of history, a 1920s Spanish revival, full of their collections, their furniture, their art. I want to restore it. For Lily, I want her to have a place with roots, with history. But I don't have the time, and frankly, I don't have the eye for it. The decorators I've hired want to gut it, paint everything white. They don't understand the soul of the place." He paused, his gaze meeting hers. "But you would. You saw the soul in a vase just before it shattered. I need someone to oversee the project, to catalogue the antiques, to manage the restoration, to make sure it's done right. Someone with an appreciation for things that last." May was speechless. It was the job she would have invented for herself in her wildest dreams. It was a lifeline back to the world her grandfather had shown her. "Why me?" she finally whispered. "Because you're the only person I've met in the last 5 years who isn't trying to sell me something," he said, a wry smile on his face. "And because I trust your judgment. You proved that when you chose to protect my daughter over yourself. The pay is substantial, and you can live on the property while you work. There's a guest house." It was a perfect, elegant solution. A way for him to keep her in his life, to assuage his guilt without it looking like charity. It gave her a purpose, a salary, her independence. It was an offer she couldn't refuse. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I'll do it." The smile that lit up Lucas Turner's face was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. It transformed him, chasing away the shadows and revealing the man he might have been before grief had walled him in. "Good," he said. "That's very good." He didn't know it, but he had just handed her the key, not just to his house, but to unraveling a betrayal that ran far deeper than either of them could ever imagine. The estate was called La Sombra, the shadow, nestled in the shade of ancient oak trees in the hills overlooking the city. It was a sleeping beauty, a masterpiece of tile and stucco, wrought iron and carved wood, slowly succumbing to neglect. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating rooms filled with furniture shrouded in white cloths, like ghosts at a perpetual wake. For May, it was heaven. She moved into the guest house, a charming two-bedroom cottage with a rose garden that was fighting a losing battle against weeds. The first week was spent simply exploring, notebook and camera in hand. She walked the cool, tiled corridors, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She uncovered treasures, a collection of 18th century Spanish colonial silver, a library filled with first editions, a series of delicate watercolors painted by Lucas's grandmother. She began her work meticulously, creating a detailed inventory of every object in the house. Her grandfather had taught her well. She photographed each piece, researched the maker's marks, noted the condition, and estimated the value. It was a colossal task, but it filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Lucas and Lily became regular visitors. On weekends, the quiet estate would come alive. Lily would run through the overgrown gardens, her laughter chasing away the ghosts. Lucas would find May in the dusty library or the cavernous dining room, and she would show him her progress. "This desk," she told him one afternoon, running her hand over a heavily carved walnut monstrosity. "It's a Vargano, 17th century. The inlay is bone. Your grandfather had an incredible eye." Lucas looked at the desk, as if seeing it for the first time. He just called it the old Spanish thing. He used to hide candy for me in one of its secret drawers. A bond began to form between them, woven from shared stories and quiet moments. He saw the passion and knowledge that had been buried beneath her waitress uniform. She saw the lonely man behind the billionaire, a father trying to build a bridge to his daughter. The lines of employer and employee began to blur. He started staying for dinner. They would eat on the guest house patio, watching the city lights glitter below, while Lily, exhausted from a day of exploring, slept on the sofa inside. It was during this time that May first noticed the discrepancies. It started with a small thing. An insurance appraisal from a year ago listed a set of 4 Louis XVI armchairs. May could only find 2. Then she noticed an invoice from a high-end restoration company, Artisan Restorations, for the regilding of a large mirror frame. But when May examined the mirror, the gilding was dull and flaking, clearly untouched for decades. The invoice was for $30,000. She filed the thoughts away, attributing them to disorganized record-keeping. The estate had been unmanaged for years, after all. One Saturday, Lucas brought a guest with him. May's heart sank when she saw Ethan Morales get out of the car. He was dressed in a ridiculously expensive weekend outfit, his smile as slick as ever. "Lucas, my friend, this place is magnificent," he gushed, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "Ethan was instrumental in the success of the investors' lunch," Lucas explained to May, though he looked uncomfortable. "He's become something of a consultant." "I'm helping Lucas navigate the finer things," Ethan said, winking at May as if they were co-conspirators. "And I heard he'd hired a new project manager. I had to see for myself who had landed such a prize." His eyes swept over May's simple work clothes, a flicker of contempt in them. Throughout the tour, Ethan was a font of unsolicited and often incorrect advice. "You should replace all this old tile, Lucas. Go for Italian marble, much cleaner. This furniture is so dark, a good coat of white paint would really brighten the place up." May gritted her teeth and remained silent. She watched him, though. She watched the way his eyes lingered on the silver in the dining room, the way he ran his hand over a tapestry with a practiced, assessing touch. He wasn't just a restaurant manager. He knew antiques, and he was hiding it. Later, as May was cross-referencing some old receipts in the study, she found a folder labeled Rosewood Terrace, Furnishings. Inside were invoices and purchase orders. Her eyes scanned the list of suppliers, and then she saw it, a name that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Artisan Restorations. The same company that had billed Lucas for the phantom mirror restoration. According to the receipts, they were also the primary supplier of art and antiques for the Rosewood Terrace. The Qing vase that had shattered. It had come from them. A cold dread began to seep into her bones. She started digging deeper. Late at night, long after Lucas and Lily had gone home, she sat at the Vargano desk, her laptop open, cross-referencing invoices from the estate with the restaurant's files, which Lucas had given her access to for a separate inventory task. A pattern emerged. Artisan Restorations would sell a piece to the restaurant. A few months later, an identical piece, or a very convincing replica, would be purchased for a fraction of the price from a lesser-known auction house. The original valuable piece would vanish from the restaurant's inventory, written off as damaged or retired. At the same time, Artisan Restorations would be billing Lucas's estate for services never rendered or for acquisitions of furniture that were already in the house. It was a sophisticated shell game, a laundering scheme for stolen art and antiques, with Ethan Morales at its center. He was using the restaurant and the estate as his personal piggy bank, replacing genuine articles with fakes and billing for fraudulent services. The two missing Louis XVI chairs weren't missing. They had likely been sold, and Ethan had pocketed the money. The $30,000 mirror restoration was pure fiction. And the Qing vase. May's blood ran cold. The original was probably sitting in a private collection somewhere. The one that had shattered and nearly killed her was likely a worthless, modern replica. Ethan had put everyone in that room at risk, all for profit. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had the truth, but she had no definitive proof. It was her word, the word of a former waitress, against a man who had successfully ingratiated himself with one of the most powerful men in the city. To accuse Ethan without irrefutable evidence would be professional suicide. Lucas might even think she was jealous, trying to sabotage a rival. She had to be smarter. She had to set a trap, and she knew just the bait to use. The charity gala was Lucas's first major social event since his wife's death. It was to be held at the newly polished Rosewood Terrace, a symbolic reopening after the robbery. It was also a coming out of sorts for his and May's relationship, which had deepened from a professional arrangement into a quiet, powerful love. The press was buzzing. The billionaire and the waitress he had plucked from obscurity. It was a story too good to resist. May. The week leading up to the gala was a strange, suspended moment in time. May felt as though she were living in two worlds at once. In one, she was the meticulous curator of La Sombra, her hands smelling of lemon oil and archival paper, her mind lost in the provenance of 18th century Spanish silver. In the other, she was a strategist, a hunter, carefully laying the last pieces of a trap that felt both terrifyingly complex and brutally simple. She had sold her grandfather's shop. The finality of signing the papers had been a physical blow, a hollowing out of her chest that left her breathless. She had walked through the empty, dusty space one last time, touching the counter where he had taught her to polish silver, standing by the window where he'd shown her how the light caught the facets of old crystal. It was the sacrifice of a ghost, the letting go of a promise she had clung to like a raft in a storm. The money that appeared in her account felt like blood money, the price of a past she could never reclaim. But it was also the price of her future, the cost of the truth. The night of the gala, The rosewood terrace was a galaxy of glittering diamonds and brittle laughter. May stood beside Lucas, the silk of the navy dress a cool foreign language against her skin. It was a beautiful gown, chosen by Lucas with a quiet intensity that had touched her, but it felt like a costume for a role she had not yet learned. She could feel the ghost of her other self, the girl in the starched white shirt and sensible shoes moving through this very room, invisible and silent. Tonight, she was anything but invisible. The whispers followed her like a wake, the speculative glances of the city's elite dissecting her, pricing her, dismissing her. That's her, the waitress. Can you believe it? He's besotted, a classic gold digger. She kept her spine straight, her chin up, her hand resting lightly on Lucas's arm. His presence was a bulwark, a solid, warm reality in a sea of illusion. "Are you certain you want to do this?" he murmured, his voice for her ears alone, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. His storm-grey eyes were dark, with a fierce protectiveness that was almost painful to behold. He knew she had a plan, though not its full, brutal scope. He had simply said, "I trust you," and in doing so, had handed her the sharpest weapon in her arsenal. "It's the only way," she whispered back, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. "To cut the rot out, you have to expose it to the light." The auction began, a carefully choreographed performance of extravagant generosity. May watched Ethan Morales hold court, gliding between tables, his smile a masterpiece of predatory charm. He was basking in the glow of his proximity to Lucas, a remora fish clinging to a great white shark. He caught her eye across the room and gave a subtle, condescending nod, a silent acknowledgement of her improbable assent. He had no idea he was looking at his executioner. Then, the moment arrived. As the bidding on a diamond necklace reached its crescendo, Ethan ascended the stage, taking the microphone with the practiced ease of a born showman. The air crackled with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice, amplified, filled the cavernous room with a false, resonant sincerity. "Tonight, we celebrate resilience, community, generosity. But integrity is the foundation upon which all those virtues are built. And it is with the heaviest of hearts that I must address a painful breach of that foundation." A profound hush descended. Every phone was raised, every eye fixed on the stage. May felt Lucas's entire body go rigid beside her, his hand moving from her arm to the small of her back, a gesture of ownership, of defense. Ethan's gaze swept the room before landing, with surgical precision, on May. His smile was a thin, cruel slash. "It has come to my attention that a man we all respect, Mr. Lucas Turner, has had his profound trust betrayed, that his gratitude has been weaponized against him in a scheme of calculated and breathtaking cruelty." He gestured to the large screen behind him. An image materialized, a bank statement. May's name was clearly visible at the top, followed by a series of deposits. The final balance was a damning figure. "This," Ethan announced, his voice ringing with theatrical outrage, "is the personal bank account of May Thompson. In the last month, you will see deposits totaling over $200,000, a remarkable sum for a project manager. But this money did not come from a salary. It came from the clandestine sale of priceless antiques, antiques stolen from the Turner estate, antiques Miss Thompson was hired to catalogue and protect." A collective gasp, sharp and sibilant, rippled through the audience. The whispers erupted into a roar. The camera flashes were like strobing, accusatory, lightning strikes. It was the story they had all been waiting for, the salacious, satisfying confirmation of their deepest cynicism. The waitress was a thief after all. Lucas started to move, a low growl of fury rumbling in his chest. "That's preposterous." May placed a hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Wait," she whispered, her voice a strange island of calm in the hurricane. "Let him build the gallows. It's important he has enough rope." Ethan, fueled by the crowd's reaction, swelled with righteous power. She has been systematically looting a collection that represents a family's history, selling off heirlooms to line her own pockets. She didn't just fool a great man. She preyed on his grief, on his gratitude after the tragic events in this very room. She is not a hero. She is a parasite, a thief, a gold digger of the highest and most despicable order. He clicked a remote. A new image flashed onto the screen. A scanned receipt from a notorious but discreet antique dealer, acknowledging the cash purchase of 2 Louis XVIII armchairs. The signature at the bottom was a perfect, damning forgery of May's own. The trap had been sprung, the bait taken. The room was a vortex of judgment. May could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, stripping her bare, convicting her. For a dizzying second, she felt the floor drop away, the sheer weight of their collective belief in her guilt threatening to suffocate her. This was the moment of truth. She could shrink, allowing their narrative to become her reality, or she could stand and detonate the world Ethan had so carefully constructed. She drew a breath, released Lucas's arm, and began to walk. The journey to the stage was the longest 10 yards of her life. Each step was a conscious act of will, a severing of a thread to the woman she had been. The silent waitress who averted her eyes, who polished the silver and cleared the plates of men like Ethan, was dying with every footfall. A new woman, forged in grief and porcelain shrapnel, was walking toward the light. She reached the stage and took the microphone from Ethan's momentarily stunned hand. He recoiled slightly, as if from a snake he had believed to be dead. She turned not to him, but to the audience, the sea of hostile, fascinated faces. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it was clear and steady, cutting through the murmuring din with the precision of a scalpel. "Mr. Morales is right about one thing," she began. "A terrible deception has occurred. A story of greed and betrayal has unfolded, but he has cast the wrong villain in his little play." She turned to the screen, her gaze cool and appraising. "That bank statement is indeed mine. The money is real, but it is not the proceeds of theft. It is the sum total of my inheritance. It is the money I received 2 weeks ago when I sold my grandfather's antique shop." She paused, letting the words sink in, letting the sacrifice behind them echo in the sudden silence. "I sold the last tangible piece of my family's history, the business he poured his life into, to pay for the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, is quite expensive." She looked from the screen to Ethan, whose face had begun to lose its confident sheen. "And that receipt," she continued, her voice hardening, "is a forgery. A brilliant one. The signature is almost perfect. It would take an expert in fraudulent documents to create something so convincing. Someone, perhaps, who owns a company that specializes in creating museum-quality replicas of famous antiques. A company that has, on occasion, been known to create convincing paperwork." She lifted the small remote from her clutch. "A company called Artisan Restorations." The name hung in the air, charged and dangerous. A flicker of panic crossed Ethan's eyes. "A company," May pressed on, her voice relentless, "that is owned and operated through a labyrinth of shell corporations by the man standing right here. Mr. Ethan Morales." She clicked the remote. The forged receipt vanished. In its place appeared a complex but clear flowchart, meticulously researched, linking Ethan through 3 holding companies directly to the ownership of Artisan Restorations. Whispers of a different kind now began to circulate, of confusion, of dawning suspicion. For 3 years, Ethan has been running a brilliant, predatory scam. He has used his position as manager of this esteemed restaurant to acquire valuable antiques, only to secretly replace them with his own company's flawless fakes, selling the originals on the black market and pocketing the difference. He has been doing the same at the Turner estate, billing Mr. Turner for exorbitant restoration work that was never performed, and slowly, piece by piece, preparing to replace priceless heirlooms with his own clever forgeries. Click. The screen changed again. A side-by-side image appeared. On the left, a high-resolution photograph May had taken of the large gilded mirror in the estate's grand salon, its patina of age clearly visible. On the right, a scanned copy of the $30,000 invoice from Artisan Restorations for its complete regilding. Highlighted in stark red was the conclusion from a report by a leading conservation expert, an expert May had paid for with her grandfather's legacy. No evidence of recent restoration. Surface analysis confirms the gilding is original, consistent with age-related wear from the early 20th century. The invoice is fraudulent. Ethan began to sputter, a strangled denial catching in his throat, but May gave him no quarter. She turned her full attention back to the room, her voice dropping, becoming thick with a cold, contained fury that was more terrifying than any shout. But fraud is just about money. This is about something more. This is about human life. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the corner where the pedestal had once stood. 2 months ago, in this room, a Qing dynasty vase shattered. A piece of it lodged in my side, missing my kidney by a centimeter. The shrapnel from it could have blinded a 5-year-old girl. Her gaze found Lily's empty chair at Lucas's table. "I have here," she said, her voice trembling with emotion for the first time, "a signed and notarized affidavit from the senior curator of Asian art at the Getty Museum, who graciously agreed to analyze the fragments I collected from the scene." Click. The final image appeared on the screen. It was a chemical analysis report, dense with technical data, but the conclusion at the bottom was brutally simple. Composition inconsistent with 18th century Qing porcelain. Glaze contains modern synthetic compounds. Estimated origin, Jingdezhen, c. 2018. Estimated value, less than $500. The vase was a fake, May said, her voice now a whisper that carried to every corner of the silent, cavernous room. A worthless replica from Artisan Restorations. Ethan had already sold the real vase to a private collector in Hong Kong for nearly $500,000. He put every single person in this room, every guest, every member of the staff, and a small child, in mortal danger, for profit. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a physical entity, a crushing weight of comprehension and horror. It was broken by a single, sharp sound, a wine glass slipping from a nerveless hand and shattering on the marble floor, a faint, pathetic echo of the explosion that had started it all. Ethan Morales stood alone on the stage, stripped bare. The spotlight that had been his element was now an interrogation lamp, exposing the rot beneath the polished veneer. His face had crumpled, the mask of urbane sophistication dissolving to reveal the pinched, pallid features of a common thief caught in the act. He looked from May's unyielding face to the hundreds of eyes now staring at him with pure, unadulterated contempt, and he seemed to physically shrink, a man erased by the truth. May's gaze left him. She looked out at the stunned faces, and then her eyes found Lucas. He had not moved. He was staring at her, and the storm in his eyes had broken. What shone there now was not just pride, not just relief. It was a raw, breathtaking awe. In that moment, she knew he finally saw her, not as a victim to be saved or a debt to be paid, but as a force entirely her own. She had not waited for him to rescue her. She had burned down her own past to light her way, and in the glare of that fire, she had saved herself. The weeks that followed were a maelstrom of legal proceedings and media frenzy, a reality May navigated from the quiet sanctuary of the guest house at La Sombra. Ethan's empire, built on fakes and fraud, collapsed like a house of cards. The audits unearthed a web of deceit that stretched back years, implicating dealers and auction houses across the globe. His public fall was as spectacular as it was absolute. May refused all interviews, all offers for tell-all books and television movies. The narrative they wanted to spin, the Cinderella waitress who brought down a kingpin, felt as false as one of Ethan's replicas. The truth was quieter, sadder, more complex. It lived in the ache she felt whenever she thought of her grandfather's shuttered shop. It lived in the phantom pains that sometimes radiated from the scar on her side. Lucas gave her space, a gift she hadn't known she needed. He understood, with an innate sensitivity that continued to surprise her, that her victory had also been a kind of death. He and Lily were a quiet, constant presence. They didn't fill the silence with questions, but with life. The sound of Lily's laughter, chasing butterflies in the overgrown garden, the comfortable quiet of sharing a simple dinner with Lucas on the patio, the city lights a distant, jeweled tapestry below them. Slowly, painstakingly, they were building a new kind of normal. One cool evening, a month after the gala, he found her in the main house. She had begun the real work, not of restoration, but of understanding. She wasn't cataloguing objects anymore. She was listening to their stories. She was standing in the grand salon, her hand resting on the gilded mirror that had been a silent witness to so much, staring at her own reflection. "I used to hate mirrors," she said softly, without turning, knowing he was there. "When I worked at the restaurant, I'd avoid looking in them. I didn't want to see the uniform, the invisibility." Lucas came to stand beside her, his reflection appearing next to hers. He didn't speak, just looked at the two of them, framed in the tarnished gold. "My grandfather taught me about provenance," she continued, her voice distant. "The history of an object. Who made it? Who owned it? Where it's been. It's what gives a thing its soul, its value. For a long time, I thought my own provenance was insignificant. A waitress from Pasadena, an orphan who couldn't save her family's legacy." "Your provenance," Lucas said, his voice a low, steady rumble, "is strength, May. It's integrity. It's seeing the value in things others overlook. It's knowing the difference between what something costs and what it's worth." He finally turned from the mirror to look at her, his grey eyes holding an ocean of emotion. "I spent years trying to erase my own provenance, trying to build an empire so vast it would blot out the memory of the man I was before my wife died, a man who was lost, terrified. I thought I could solve everything with money. I tried to solve you with money." He shook his head, a small, self-deprecating gesture. "I saw what you did for Lily as an invoice to be paid. I didn't understand that it wasn't a transaction. It was a testament to who you are." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out something that glinted in the dim light. It wasn't a diamond ring. It was a single, old, impossibly ornate iron key. "The board of the Turner Foundation met this morning," he said, his voice dropping, becoming imbued with a quiet intensity. "They have unanimously approved the creation of a new, independent division, the Turner Legacy Initiative. Its sole mandate will be the preservation and restoration of historic art, architecture, and craftsmanship. They have endowed it with a substantial budget. He paused, his eyes searching hers, and they have approved its first director. He took her hand, the one that wasn't resting on the mirror, and placed the heavy key in her palm, closing her fingers around it. It was the key to the front door of La Sombra. "Your grandfather taught you to see the soul in things," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is your house now, May. Not a job, not a gift, a home. A place to put that soul to work, to build something that lasts." He hesitated, a flicker of the old, guarded vulnerability crossing his face. "If you'll have it. If you'll have us." From the hallway, a small figure appeared, pajama-clad and sleepy-eyed. Lily padded over, clutching a well-loved stuffed rabbit, and slipped her small hand into May's free one. She leaned her head against May's side, a perfect, trusting weight. May looked down at the three of them reflected in the antique mirror. A man scarred by grief, a woman marked by sacrifice, and a child who was the bridge between them. They were not a fairy tale. They were a collection of broken, beautiful pieces, slowly, carefully being put back together. This was her provenance now. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the reflection. Tears for the shop that was gone, for the grandfather she missed, for the invisible girl she no longer was. They were tears of grief and gratitude, of ending and beginning. She squeezed Lily's hand, her fingers tightening around the cold iron of the key in her other palm. She looked at Lucas, a true, brilliant smile finally reaching her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, the word a quiet vow in the heart of the sleeping house. "Yes, we'll have it." Together, the three of them turned from the mirror and walked toward the grand oak doors. May slid the key into the lock. The sound of the tumblers turning was a deep, satisfying click, the sound of a story, long dormant, finally finding its proper home. As the door swung open, it did not reveal the darkness of the night, but the first, pale, promising light of dawn.